In the US, people normally start with quarter midgets. However, where I'm from in the UK, we actually start with go-karts. Now, my story is pretty different from most kids who start racing. Normally, someone in your family races. Brother, dad, uncle, someone. Or, if you're a little boy, you just think, oh, that's really cool, I want to go do that. My family, we didn't even know that that type of go-karting where you could go race other people existed. My dad was just a race fan. We grew up watching the races on TV, and I'd be in the room watching them with him. He started taking me to racetracks when I was 8 years old, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But there were never any girls driving. And it didn't even cross my mind that that was something that I could do, or even probably that I wanted to do. I just thought it was really, really cool. Then, when we were 11 years old, we moved house. I know a lot of you have probably experienced that, and even the kids in the room. Move to a new house, you get new friends. One of the new friends had a birthday party at a local indoor go-kart track. That's when I discovered go-karts for the first time, and I started nagging. I'm like, Dad, can we go back to the go-kart track? Can we go back to the go-kart track? And so I started racing at this little local indoor go-kart track. Now, once we'd been going there for about a month, 4 weeks, the guy running the kids club pulled my dad to one side, and he was like, you know, your daughter has really outgrown this place. You should think of taking her karting properly. And we looked at him, we said, what do you mean? This isn't karting properly? And he said, no, where you go and race outside. And we said, oh, you know, the nearest rental place outside, it's hours away, we're not doing that every Saturday. And he said, no, I mean where you own your own go-kart and you prepare it yourselves and you go race kids from around the country. And our jaws hit the floor, and we're like, people do that? And in England, and I'm going to age myself seriously here, in the mid to late 90s, we didn't really have the internet. It was there, but nobody really used it, nobody really did anything with it. And so these days, you know, you'd just go onto Google like go-karts, you'd get a bunch of pictures and understand. We had to look through the local papers. So there's my dad and I buying up all of these little local regional papers in our region, and we found one that advertised a local go-kart track. So we went out, and we watched them racing, and I'm like tugging on my dad's sleeve, like, come on, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. So, for my 13th birthday, I got my first go-kart. We borrowed a pickup truck from a friend of ours. We took my dad's toolbox with us to the track, where we discovered that none of the tools in his toolbox fit any of the nuts on the go-kart at all, and we were borrowing tools all weekend long. And that was the start of my racing career, at a little outdoor go-kart track on an old airfield set up with hay bales and a very bumpy runway in the southeast of England. 2 years later, I qualified for the British National Championships in my class for the first time. 2 years after that, I was a semi-works driver, so that means that at 17 years old, I actually left my home in England, lived abroad for the first time, moved to Italy, where I lived above the go-kart factory. I helped them do the simple tasks that I could do in the factory in the daytime, prepping the cars for other people. And they paid me, admittedly, a very small amount of money to drive the go-karts. So I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And it was a life experience that I would never have had without racing. And from there, it was just a progression. I got into cars for the first time when I was 20 years old. These days, that's actually considered exceptionally old. We have kids racing at the Indianapolis 500 who are 20 years old or younger these days. But 10 years ago, it was the done thing to get out of go-karts and into racing cars at that age. And as I started racing in Europe, I moved up in 2007 to a category called World Series by Renault. Now, most of you won't have heard of that category, but those of you who follow, does anyone follow Formula One racing in Europe in this room? Okay, I've got a hand at the back. Does anyone follow IndyCar racing in the US in this room? Okay, I'm getting quite a show of hands. So in IndyCar racing in the US, you have the IndyCar series, and then you have Indy Lights, which is like college football to the NFL. In Europe, it's a bit more complicated. You have Formula One at the top of the tree. You then have the college football, which is called GP2, but GP2 is very, 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 it's really expensive. It costs as much sponsorship to run GP2 as it does to run IndyCar. However, there's another series with a car that's almost as quick as GP2, has a similar amount of power, but because it doesn't race on Formula One weekends, it's a lot less expensive to do. And in 2007, those are the cars I ended up racing. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But I was the only female driver in Europe to have raced in that category, or in GP2, so either of the big two, in like 5-6 years. I was the first female driver ever to score a point in either of those categories, and I remained the only one until just last year. Okay? I mean, to me, that's kind of ridiculous. There are a lot of really talented female drivers out there. And that actually wasn't a statistic I liked, having being the only one to have scored a point. Because I'm like, come on, you know, there's more of us out here who can do this. We just need to get the opportunity. I'm still the only female driver to hold a pole in that category, but I'm hoping that changes too. But still, that GP2 in England and in Europe, that real college football level, hasn't been a single female driver in that. Now, most people look at female drivers and think that, you know, because you are a female, it's going to be easier for you to go out and race the sponsorship. Because you're unique, you're a different proposition. For a little while, that was actually the truth, especially in the US. It was never the truth in Europe, where I grew up. But when I first moved here to the US in 2009 to race Indy Lights, that kind of was the truth, and it was part of the reason why I came to the US. Because motorsport is an expensive sport, and it is very difficult to put together the sponsorship to go and race. And I had the opportunity to race at that college football level in the US for 2 years. I'm a race winner in that series. I hold the record for the most poles by a female driver in the season. I'm the only pole winner out at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And at the time I was doing all that, it was a little easier for female drivers to find the sponsorship. However, by 2011, the time I ran my first Indianapolis 500, things were already getting tougher for us. For those of you who follow IndyCar, in 2010, I came out of this really great year in Indy Lights, the feeder category. And, you know, in college football, you have a draft where the best people get picked to come and play in the NFL. In IndyCar, we don't have that system. If you absolutely win the championship, so you are the best person in the entire college football league, Heisman Trophy winner, you might get picked. For the rest of us, it involves a lot of hard work. For me, I didn't know what I was going to be doing in 2011. And I have a manager who helps me. And he spent a long time pestering a team owner of one of the smaller teams, a guy called Eric Bachelard. And eventually, Eric conceded and agreed to a one-day test where I was going to get to come drive his IndyCar for the first time. Thankfully, I did quite a good job at that one-day test, and I then started bugging Eric to try and put a car out for me for the Indy 500. For those of you who don't know how qualifying for the Indy 500 works, you get any amount of cars turn up, and only 33 of them get to start the race, the fastest 33 cars. Normally, there's only 35 or 36 cars. Sometimes at the moment, there's only 34 cars. So, you know, you have to have a crash or something go wrong or be really, really struggling to not get in. 2011 was the last year before IndyCar updated to a new chassis, so every single team that had a working chassis decided to come play. When the entry list for the Indianapolis 500 came out, I was actually sitting at home while the rest of the IndyCar series was in Long Beach competing. And I actually had to pull it up on the internet. And I'm counting the list down, and there it was. Car 34, TBA, to be announced. But it was entered by my team owner, so I knew that was my car. There were 43 cars on the list that year. Every waking moment I spent between that day when the entry list came out and actually opening day itself at Indy was trying to convince my team owner not to back out because he was so scared. He had one driver running full-time in the series, and the thing that actually helped me out the most was his driver who was running the entire year was actually having a pretty tough time. It would have been terrible for his little team to not have any cars in the Indianapolis 500. You know, all team owners spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money in their teams. And normally, they're like racing drivers. They're pretty proud people. They have egos. You don't want none of your cars to be in the race. And that was the thing that convinced him to keep me in one of his cars, because I convinced him that we could qualify it. We looked great all week through testing. We were like running in the mid-20s. So out of 40 cars, 33 get in, mid-20s, small team, small engine budget. We're like, you know, this is pretty solid. We got to qualifying morning on Saturday, and we had an engine issue. That meant every time I ran on the track, I got slower and slower and slower. And that night in the garage area, everybody panicked. And it was led, unfortunately, by the team owner, because his other driver hadn't been fast enough all week. But we were, and then now we were too slow too, and we couldn't convince him it was the engine. So we had to change everything on the car. I turned up on Sunday morning, which is the second day of qualifying. The guys were still working on the car. Morning warm-up started on Sunday morning, where you go out and check your car before qualifying. The guys were still working on the car. They sat me in the car in the garage. I had a guy sitting on the front of the car, strapping me in as we pulled out to pit lane, and I was warming up the engine by revving it with my right foot as we towed out to pit lane. We ran 2 laps, and the handling of the car with all of these setup changes that had just been thrown at it overnight was not exactly great. That's racing speak, by the way, for being polite about something that, you know, you kind of want to just throw in the trash can. So we got back to the garage area, and my engineer and I looked at each other. We said, okay, this car's got to get back in line to go qualify, because there's rain coming in, and if we miss our slot in line, we're going to be out of the race. We're going to lose that opportunity. What change can we make in time? Now, they've taken all night to make these changes, so they obviously can't put it back in the next 45 minutes. We picked one area of the car to try and fix. We told the guys to make the change. The car went and got in line. I went over to my team owner, and we had this conversation. I said to him, I'm going to go out there, and on my first lap of qualifying into turn 1, I'm going to try and hold my right foot to the floor. I said, if I lift, we're going to go home because we're not going to be fast enough. If my engineer and I haven't fixed this, you need to understand that it's going to come back in a bag of bits. And we're going to be going home. And you know as well as I do that there is absolutely no extra budget in this to pay for this if the car comes back in a bag of bits. And my team owner looked at me and he said, okay, he said, you go out there and you do everything you can to be fast enough to qualify that car. And if it doesn't make it round, it does not make it round. I said, okay. Came down the front straight at around 230 miles an hour heading into turn 1. I like to tell people I momentarily closed my eyes, but the driving coaches at IndyCar don't like that part of the story. Apparently that's not good at 230. I turned in, and the rear of the car was moving, but it stuck. And I spent the next 4 laps moving the tools I had in the cockpit of the car to stay on top of it and make sure we were there, and we qualified for that race against those 42 other cars. My teammate, he didn't make it in. He wasn't quick enough. That year, I was the only one-off rookie driver trying to start their first IndyCar race who wasn't running the full series, who actually made the Indianapolis 500. And I thought, oh, you know, cool, here we go, you know, that this is it, this is going to really be the launch of me into IndyCar now. You know, I'm effectively getting drafted now. I've proved to people I can do this. This is going to be great. Yeah, racing is never that simple or easy. My team owner was a fantastic guy, and he actually let me race the car I qualified. For those of you who don't know the rules of the Indianapolis 500, it's the car that qualifies, not the driver. And so he could have taken me out of the car and had my teammate run the car. He didn't. He let me run the car in the race, and I came 20th that year. We were pretty pleased with that result given the time we had. And then after the Indianapolis 500, I was back sort of standing around again, looking about me. What do I do now? Another team reached out to me. They weren't a full-time team, but they wanted me to come run one of their cars. Previously, they'd been a pretty good team in the series, so it seemed like a no-brainer and something I had to do. The day after I signed the contract with them, my team owner, who I had run the Indianapolis 500 for, called me up and said he wanted me to drive his car for the rest of the season. And I couldn't do it because I'd already agreed to go drive for this other team. But I thought things were going to be great. I turned up with this other team, full of positivity. It was a new track I hadn't raced at before in the feeder series Indy Lights, but, I'm a racing driver. We have confidence. This is going to be good. It's going to go fine. I didn't have a teammate. I didn't know the track. I'd only done one race in an Indy car at a completely different type of track, so I didn't know the car. And the competition level in IndyCar is pretty high. It did not go fine. It was a really, really tough experience. And at the end of 2011, there was an IndyCar race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway where we had the most horrific accident. One of my colleagues actually passed away from that crash. There were 4 of us that ended up upside down or on fire. It was just one of those nightmare scenarios. And so here I am, this girl that did very well in Indy Lights, had a really strong start to IndyCar, then didn't look like much in the next couple of races, and then I was one of the cars in this really nasty accident. Any momentum I thought my career had, it just fell through the floor at that point in time. At the end of 2011, I had 3 operations on my right hand in the space of about a week to try and fix the damage that was done in the crash. And I spent all winter sort of doing rehab work on my hand, trying to get it to move again properly, trying to get some strength back into it. At the start of 2012, I was allowed to go back to a gym and start training. And I suddenly discovered that it wasn't just my right hand. They'd taken a tendon out of my right forearm where I had 2 to replace a tendon that I needed in my hand. Now, while a lot of people only have 1 tendon in their forearm, apparently if you're used to operating with 2, you notice when you're missing 1. And so I had to start building the strength up in my right arm all over again. I had to start trying to build up the grip strength in my right hand all over again. And May was coming in 2012, and the Indy 500 was coming. And I didn't have any money because I'd spent all winter trying to get better instead of trying to find sponsors. To be quite honest with you, I probably wasn't even in the right mindset most of the winter trying to try and find sponsors. To team owners, I was no longer the girl that had qualified the car the year before in, circumstances that people didn't think I should have qualified in, and I was no longer the girl that had the strong race. I was the girl that was involved in the big crash. What was going to happen when I got in a race car again? Would my head be okay? They didn't know. And however hard I tried to convince people, I didn't even have any sponsorship to bring with me. As we rolled into qualifying for the 2012 Indianapolis 500, I thought I was going to be making a seat with one of the smaller teams. At the last minute, it didn't happen. The deal fell through, and I had to watch that race. It is one of the hardest experiences of my life. At the time, I really struggled, both personally and in public. I was in a place where I was being a little negative. I wasn't positive. And a friend of mine called me up and said, hey, we've been friends for a long time. I really need to talk to you because you're not going to get anywhere and you're not going to get back if you keep feeling like this and showing people you feel like this. It's okay to feel down and out, and it's okay to feel hurt, but you've got to pick yourself back up by the bootstraps and start to be more positive, or you're not going to get back in a race car. At the time, I didn't want to hear it, but it must have sunk in because I started making changes. And I started working my backside off. I started trying to be positive in public, and the more positive I was in public and on social media, the more I actually started to believe it a little bit in the inside. At the end of 2012, a series that isn't IndyCar came to race in the US with big, fast, open-wheel cars. They were looking for a local American driver to come join their series for the American round, but none of the IndyCar drivers were interested, and there was not a single American in Indy Lights that year. Now, I may not be American, but as an Indy 500 starter, someone who lived in the US and has a social media following, someone who the European teams knew, I was the next candidate, and I said yes immediately. So my race helmet and I got on an airplane, went to California. I met the team on Wednesday. We made a race seat on Thursday. I drove the car for the first time on Friday in 2 30-minute test sessions. And that weekend, in a race series with 18 cars, I actually finished in the top 10 and scored points for my team in both races. So that was pretty cool. And the best thing of all, I had this hand back on a steering wheel. And you know what? It actually worked and did what it was supposed to do. And that was a really big relief for me. And that gave me the confidence to start fighting for next May even harder. As we got to May 2013, one of the smaller team owners, a guy called Dale Coyne Racing, he was the guy who had been thinking about trying to put me in a car the previous year. And because we'd gotten so close, I never went away. I kept bugging Dale. I kept calling Dale. I kept having my manager bug and call Dale. Dale was the only team owner who actually pulled me to one side, looked me in the eye, and said, "You really think you're going to be okay when you get out there again at those speeds?" I said, "Yes." And he looked at me and he said, "Okay, we'll field you a car." The others all thought it. He was the only one that actually asked me, looked at me, and wanted to gauge my reaction. As 2013 Indianapolis 500 opening day got closer and closer, I admittedly started to get a little bit nervous. You have all of these thoughts in the back of your head. How will I react when I actually get out there? I'm telling everyone I'm going to be okay. I've convinced will I really be okay at the first time at those speeds? Because don't forget, when you drive on a road course, you're only hitting a top speed of about, this is my world, only hitting a top speed of about 170 on the straights. In an Indy car at the Indianapolis 500, I am turning through the corners at over 220 miles an hour. I am hitting in the mid-230s at the end of the straight, especially in qualifying trim. So it's in the back of my head, this little voice. It's really going to be okay? On opening day, the first day I had sat in an Indy car since that accident happened, I was a little pale. Apparently I looked green. But I was nervous. I was a little clammy. My heart rate was high. Towed out to pit lane, and I'm edgy, and I'm thinking, I really hope this is gonna. They strapped me in, headed down pit lane, turned left, got onto the back straight, started to get up to speed. For those of you who are wondering, it took me 7 laps to get flat out again at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It took me 15 laps to get over 220 miles an hour. And my team owner was very happy with that. And the nice thing is once I got back up to speed, first lap I was a little nervous. Second lap started to feel like home. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth lap, I was just building up one step at a time, getting used to the new chassis because it's a different chassis from the old Indy car I'd driven before. By lap 7, I was starting to feel comfortable. By that lap 15, where I hit 220, I was starting to really push the boundaries. That year, I was on a limited engine program and with one of the older engines from the previous year in the back of my car. So we weren't that fast all month long. But I made an impression on my team owner and on my engineers. Thankfully, it was a positive one. That doesn't always work that way in this sport, but thankfully it was. 2 weeks later, my team owner had a gap in one of his cars for a high bank oval called Texas, the exact same type of track where I had had my wreck. He called me up. I got to go do that race. 1 month later, they had another gap where they didn't have a driver for their core. I got the phone call. That race, we managed to come home with a top 15 finish for them that helped keep that car in the leader's circle at the end of the year. So Dale Coyne has been a fantastic team owner to me. Last year, when I told him in January that I was speaking to Susan G. Komen and we were trying to run this pink Indy car, Now, for those of you who are wondering, and for some of you it'll be obvious, but Susan G. Komen does not spend money on an IndyCar program. I'm going to make that quite clear right now. Okay? Lots of people, most people completely got it. A few people got very, very offended by the whole thing because they thought that's what was happening. What we do is we created a partnership whereby I go out there and represent them, and we have their logos on the race car, and we try and find the funding to run the race car through other means by people who want to be connected to Susan G. Komen. But in the first year, that wasn't going to be possible because it was such a short lead-up time. So you know who got me Indianapolis 500 last year and on a full-length engine program and with all that we could imagine? Same guy, that team owner, Dale Coyne. Pretty amazing guy. And he didn't actually have any other races where they were looking for a spare driver last year. But they wanted to keep my helmet on the truck because they wanted me to know that I was their substitute driver if they ever needed someone. And this year, Dale and I are working together again to try and bring this pink car back to the Indianapolis 500. And when I look at where I was just 3 years ago in 2012, and that awful place I was in and how down and out I thought I was, it's a really big lesson. Your bootstraps are there for a reason. Pick yourself up by them. And the other lesson that really fell into this was how much hard work actually goes into this. I was a little girl, and I wasn't that little. I was, 13 when I first started racing go-karts, but I used to look at race car drivers when I went to racetracks. I used to think, oh my God, they get to fly around in private jets, and they have this really cool lifestyle, and yep. I think 13, 14-year-old Pippa thought I was going to be this, massively successful driver with this incredible income, and again, the whole flying around in a private jet thing, everyone would know my name. Teenage confidence is a wonderful thing. By the time I got into my 20s and I was actually racing in Europe, I was starting to figure out just how tough this thing was going to be. I am now incredibly grateful for the position where I am in, but for those of you who are wondering what life is actually like for someone like me who is a part-time racing driver, I spend most of my year working on marketing deals with Susan G. Komen and business-to-business deals to make a race car run once a year. The rest of the time, it's just, if my team owner needs a substitute driver, I am very lucky to be top of his list. However, the check you see me receive at the banquet after the Indianapolis 500, that beautiful check that has all the zeros, that's not my check. It goes to run a race car. Last year, I was one of the voices of IndyCar Radio, and I got to travel around with the IndyCar series, calling all of their races. That was one of my jobs. This year, I'm actually not doing that, but I'm working with another broadcasting team, broadcasting some different events. So one of my jobs is I'm a broadcaster. Another job, I'm a driving coach. So that applies to people who want me to come out and watch and help them and make them get faster who are actually racing. And I also work at schools. I work at the Miles Ahead Mini Motoring School that's based out at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and I actually work for the Porsche driving school down in Birmingham, Alabama. With the mini school, I'm right at the top of the instructor list now, so I get a lot of work. With the Porsche school, I'm pretty new, so I'm still trying to fight my way up the list so I can get more work. For those of you wondering how I get to Birmingham, Alabama each time, I drive my road car. I'm not even flying commercial down there. I'm driving 8 hours to go work 2 or 3 days, and then I'm driving 8 hours home afterwards. And yet, I wouldn't change it for the world, because I've got to this place where I realize that I'm lucky, and I'm so fortunate to be involved in everything I'm involved in. I love being partnered with Susan G. Komen. The whole pink thing, it took a little bit of getting used to, okay? Girl race car drivers in general, you have to be pretty tough to be a girl race car driver. Go-karting is meant to be a non-contact sport, but anyone who tells you that hasn't watched a go-kart race. Go-karting is a full-on contact sport. You just have to be smart about it and hide it from the officials. So, and yes, you're one of the toughest people out there, you're going to suffer. So I had to be the tough girl. Being a tough girl did not involve wearing pink. All through my racing career, I never had pink on my race suit. I never had pink on my race helmet. I'd never had pink on my car. The good news is I am now wearing pink for a very good cause. Now, at the start of last May, I first turned up in the garage area with pink sneakers, pink socks, pink fleece, and I've got a pink polo shirt on underneath. Heck, I even had pink hairbands, okay? I kind of sort of shuffled in a little bit, you know, didn't really want too many people to see me. I grew into it. The more survivors that came and found me and told me how proud they were of that car, that they thought it was a beacon of hope. The gentleman who came and found me and gave me a decal of his wife's name to carry because she didn't quite make it to the Indianapolis 500. The people who waited for me, the race fans who I've known for years and years and years, but I never knew their story. I never knew they'd battled with this disease. One of the singers who came to the Pink press conference where we announced the whole program, watching her go through her battle personally, closely, up front, in a much more personal way than I even did with my own aunt, and then attending her funeral. This is not a weak color, and it took me a while to get there. But by race day at last year's Indianapolis 500, I was walking around in this stuff with my head held high. I am proud to wear this color, and I am proud to be associated with this cause. It means something to so many people. And anybody who thinks pink is a color for little curls and is a weak color, that they don't know that this isn't. This is a color for the brave. It's a color for fighters. It's a color for people who need hope. And it means something to so many people. My team owner and I already mentioned this, we're working really hard to bring this back to the Indianapolis 500 again this year. And as you guys can see, I'm coming out doing appearances decked out in the pink and with my team owner's logo and the Kokomo logos on me. This is not saying we have a program together right now. This is our expression of intent. We intend to be doing this again, and we intend to be doing it together. And yes, trust me, no one knows more than me how close May is to right around the corner, but we're working very hard on this, and we're very hopeful you're going to see pink back on the racetrack in 2015.
Very nice, thank you, Pippa. Pippa has graciously allowed us to ask some questions. So do you guys have any questions that you'd like to ask of Pippa? I'll start the questioning. Actually, I've got.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know that.
This is going to be bad.
That should kind of scare you. But folks do need to understand that the fun that you have on the track is a very small percentage of what the life of a race car driver truly is. I mean, it's selling yourself. It's being out there and getting sponsors and convincing they'll join. And you have to be quite the. Can you become intimidating?
I have to be quite the little entrepreneur, actually, to do what I do. So it keeps me very, very busy. For those of you who are active on social media, I'm going to warn you now. Only follow me if you want a lot of noise, because I'm going to clutter up your feed something ridiculous, especially as we get closer to May. I'm at Pippa Mann on Twitter, on Instagram. I'm Pippa Mann on Facebook, and I am posting stuff all of the time. Noisy does not even begin to cover it. I also spend a lot of my time working out, and a lot of the income that I actually make that's disposable income from this other work I do, it actually goes straight back into my training regime. Because even though I only get to drive once a year, I'm working out year-round. It's that mentality. You've got to be ready. Got to be ready if the opportunity comes. What does a race car driver do to work out? We do cardio training, so that means we do long intervals, which are really boring, where you're like going for like 45 minutes, an hour and a half, steady state, medium-high heart rate. We do lactate intervals that are like 5-6 minutes long, where you pretty much want to die after every one. We do short intervals that are 90 seconds, 1 minute, even 30 seconds long, where you're trying to get those ultimate massive high heart rate spikes. We do weight training. I bet I could bench press some of you in the crowd. We do strength training with big weight. You're shaking your head at me. I could. We do strength training where we lift pretty big weights for low amounts of reps. We do endurance training where we lift little weights for lots of reps. We do circuit training where we combine it all together. We have battle ropes, we flip tires, we use sledgehammers. We do all sorts of fun stuff. But most of the time, I don't think it's fun at all. Most of the time, I'm like, oh, here we go again.
Is there a way, anybody have any questions? Otherwise, I'm going to keep asking mine.
Come on, don't be shy.
So, yeah,
Oh, we have a question.
Put a hand up. Here's a question. Yes, ma'am.
Awesome question. It was actually last year in qualifying. I want to say 229.3. Might be 229.227, but it's something right in that range. My fastest lap full stop was a 229.78 or 79. This year my goal is to try and break 230. I hope I'm not the only female driver in the race this year, but if the temperatures are right and the new aero we have on the cars is a little bit faster again, I mean, it's pretty close last year. And hopefully me and that other female driver maybe will be the first women in history over 230 this year. So fingers crossed for that. That'll be a nice little one to tick off the checklist.
Is there a way, Pippa, that you can explain to people, I'm sure you're asked this a lot, but can you explain to someone what it feels like to be going 230 miles an hour? Most of us, we get to 70, we get a little shaky.
So the really, really big thing is as I explained to you guys, I came up through the feeder series. I did not just jump in an Indy car and go 230 miles an hour. What that does is it's actually training my brain, as well as my body and everything else. So the first time I drove an Indy Lights car at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the car didn't handle that good and I'm doing about 180, it felt pretty fast. That's not a good thing in a race car. That makes you uncomfortable as a driver. However, we started to get the handling better. I got more used to it. I spent more time in the car. By my second year at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in Indy Lights running 180s, I was super comfortable. In fact, I ran nearly a 190 and was the fastest person out there and won pole that year. When I transitioned to IndyCar, my brain took about, I would say probably the first 20 laps to really get used to it. And what it does is it slows it down. So to me, running an Indy car at Indianapolis Motor Speedway feels no faster than running my Indy Lights car once that felt comfortable. So to me, I'm not going down the front straight any quicker in an Indy car than I was in an Indy Lights car. And in an Indy Lights car, I got so comfortable that it didn't feel like it was happening that quickly. Now, when this changes is when something goes wrong. Then you know you're going fairly quickly. But for the most part, it's this very interesting phenomenon where your brain slows things down. It's like things are happening in slow motion. In 2013, I actually had a crash at one of the tracks where the car got sideways and I thought I could catch it and I thought I could catch it. And I ended up not catching it and I splattered it into the wall and took bits off it. But the point to this story is I watched it back on tape and I couldn't believe how quickly it had actually happened in real life. Because I sat there at the time, and I'm turning right, correcting it, and I'm turning right, correcting it, and it's coming back, and no, it's not, and I'm sitting there with as much luck as I've got, and It took forever. But when I watched it back, it happened so much more quickly. And that's the really interesting thing about the way your brain works as a racing driver. It's that capability to slow things down so you have time to react. Because if it had happened as quickly in my head as it actually did happen in real life, I almost wouldn't have had time to react at all. And yet I know I was sitting there feeling like I had all of this opposite lock-in trying to save the car forever. And if I hadn't hit a bump, it would have come back. But you watch it on TV, and you think, oh, there was no chance of that. So that's the really interesting thing about human brains and how they work at those speeds.
The mind-blowing part to me about those cars is that just like you're talking about, you wrecked a car going 200 plus miles per hour, and yet here you are, just fine. Those cars are amazing technological pieces, aren't they?
They're incredible, and we actually sit in what's called a carbon safety cell that surrounds the driver, and it does our very best to protect us. All of the other stuff that you see comes off during a crash, it's actually dissipating energy, so it's taking energy away from us. However, at the same time, you never hit a wall at over 200 miles an hour without it hurting. I was limping for a damn week on my stupid foot. But, in the big scheme of things, it doesn't hurt that much. Do you have a question? No?
Okay, here we go.
Ooh, that's a really great question. Um, After the same crash that I'm talking about, the one that happened in 2013, I felt terrible because, one, I'm the idiot who just broke a race car into many pieces. Two, my guys are now going to be working all night to try and fix this. Three, I didn't bring any sponsorship to this table. My team owner who asked me to come drive this car is now reaching into his pocket and it's my fault. That's really, really hard. And it's not because I crashed the car because I'm scared, it's all of that other stuff. And what actually happened is the senior driver on the team and the team owner actually grabbed me and he said, same thing happened to me last year, the same damn corner. Like, our cars do not like that corner. And they went through it with me and they explained what happened, and that really helped me. But in terms of a personal thing, whatever it is, when something bad happens to you, it can be really, really hard to get yourself out of that rut. But if you want things to get better, you have to find a way to do it. To me, the big driving factor is always that I want to be back in a race car. I want to be back in a race. That drives me forwards. It's about finding something that drives you. And that really helps you get out of when bad situations happen. You've got, maybe it's for my family. Maybe it's for my kids. Maybe it's for my mom and dad. Maybe it's because, I'm not going to let my best friend down. Maybe it's for me personally. Maybe it's because I am going to become an NFL player. Maybe it's because I am going to go to that really cool college. Maybe it's because, okay, this was another setback, but I am determined to start my own business. It's that drive. You can only find it within yourself, and that will be what you use to pick yourself up and drive yourself forwards. Never let go of the drive. Sometimes it's really hard, but never let go of that drive.
Anybody else have any other questions for Pippa? Okay.
When do you get like free time? Like,
So, to give you guys an idea of my schedule, last Wednesday, I got up, I went and trained, then I got in my car and I drove the 8 hours down to Birmingham, Alabama. I worked Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday with Porsche. I spent Monday morning at the racetrack speaking to my team owner about this year. I drove back and got back to my home at about 10 p.m. on Monday night, at which point I sat and did emails for about 3 hours. I got up and attended a breakfast for Kokomo in Central Indiana that started at 7:30 a.m. the following morning. I then had meetings all day, culminating in me being a girl and having a hair appointment at 8:30 p.m. at night where my hairdresser stayed late to see me, so I took her sushi. And the reason I had to see her that night is because I was getting up to catch a plane the next day. Went to Miami. 9:30 a.m. departure down to Miami, spent the afternoon in my hotel room with a really cool view going through emails. Went to an event that evening for Susan G. Komen's affiliate down there. Got back to the hotel room at around 1 a.m. Got on a plane the next morning at 9 a.m. to come back to Indianapolis. I was in the gym at 1 p.m. I was in a meeting at 3 p.m. I went to the Central Indiana Race for the Cure committee meeting at 6 p.m. that evening. Went home, saw my husband, buried my head in some emails. What day came after that? Friday? I think I'm up to yesterday. Yesterday, got up, went to the gym, training, spent 2 hours over lunch answering emails. Then in the afternoon, I had 2 photo shoots, one out at Indianapolis Motor Speedway and one for Indy Monthly in downtown Indianapolis. Today, this morning, I'm here. This afternoon, I actually get to see my husband before he travels as well for work, and he leaves tomorrow morning. So this afternoon, I'm going to put the laptop down, spend some time with my husband. So I'm actually going to be spending Sundays going through my emails. I've got about 100 right now I need to get to before Monday morning. So that's my Sunday. I also need to go drop my race suit that I used in the photo shoots back off at the suit manufacturer. I need to go pick up my helmet. I have a special helmet for photo shoots because my real helmet gets completely battered and bruised and has chips out of it, so it only looks good once. And then it looks really cool, but not smart for photo shoots. So I have to go pick up the replica helmet. I have dinner with a film crew. because on Monday we are filming from 8 a.m. out at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. On Tuesday morning, I'm going to be in the gym at 8 a.m. I then have a call with Susan G. Komen's Dallas's office at 11 a.m. And I'm going to be spending all afternoon starting to go through that footage and sort it. And by the time I get to Friday, I'm flying down to St. Pete for the first IndyCar race for 48 hours to spend more time with my team owner. Well, that's what my schedule looks like. It's not busy. I don't do much. I sit at home all day. I get a date night tonight.
Kind of exciting. Any other questions for Pippa? All right, a couple more here. Yes, ma'am.
So the honest answer is I actually, one of the difficulties with being as busy as I am trying to put my program together is that I do sometimes go through like several days where I'm meant to be in the gym where I'm just not. Because when I'm working for Porsche down in Alabama, that's a 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. day. There's no time to work out in that. Because if you think I'm going to get up and, and then I've got 3 hours of emails to do, so I don't get the time. But when I'm here in town, I try to be in there 5 days a week. And in the off season, when we're trying to get stronger, we tend to do various lifting stuff 2 to 3 times a week, and cardio the other days. And now at this time of year, we're doing a lot more cardio. We're doing endurance lifting with smaller weights, and we're doing a lot more circuit training. So we're doing a lot more stuff that's heart and lung specific, and just maintaining the muscle mass we've tried to build over the winter. Does that make sense? Okay.
Okay, one more. Yes, ma'am.
So, unfortunately, I'm not back with IndyCar Radio this year. They found another broadcaster who was able to pay all of their own travel for the year. And I actually wasn't paying my own travel because I refuse to do that when I'm working. Otherwise, I don't earn very much money from the broadcasting, and it gets difficult. However, I am going to be down there. I am going to be spending time with Dale. How close are we? We're nearly in April. I hope we're close. I can tell you that we're working very hard. I can tell you that if it doesn't happen, there's probably going to be a lot of egg on a lot of faces, none more than mine. Komen, Central Indiana, Komen in Dallas would be very, very disappointed. There is a lot of work that has gone in behind the scenes of stuff that can't wait until we get the program finally announced. And it's really, really difficult to juggle that. There are hundreds and hundreds of hours into various projects that all center around this race car being on track in May. But at the same time, I don't hold the ultimate final card on that. It's down to several things being completed, some of which are out of my control, some of which are even slightly out of Dale's control. My big goal with the car this year is last year, Dale was the guy who helped put it on track. I don't want his team to be in the red because of my car this year at the Indianapolis 500. I want my car to try and wash its face this year, and I am working super hard to try and make that happen.
Ladies, a big round of applause for Miss Pippa Mann.
And if anyone wants pictures, I'm just going to kind of hang around down here at the front of the stage for a few minutes.
That's fantastic, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to invite our station manager, Russ Casper, here. I'll take that from you, so you don't mess up. I'm going to invite our station manager, Russ Casper, and I'm going to invite Chris Scott from Kokomo Toyota to come on up here as well, and the Kokomo Honda and Kokomo Auto World families. And we have a presentation that we're going to make to Pippa. Part of the deal to have Pippa come join us today was we told her that we would make a donation on her behalf because she has a Race for the Cure team, right?
Yeah, actually, it's my first year as a team captain for the Central Indiana region of Susan G. Komen. So this year's Race for the Cure downtown Indianapolis, I'm actually going to be walking with my 5K team, and we're called Pippa's Team Coffee. So I'm trying to raise money locally as well as nationally.
And if folks want to make a donation to your team, how can they do that?
I'd love to say I know the links off by heart.
You'll put some on Facebook.
Yep, it's on my Facebook, it's on my Twitter. If you go to Komen Central Indiana, they have a Facebook, they commonindy.org/go to/Pippa's Pink Coffee. So I think that's the actual link, but that's a bit more complicated. If you go to their homepage, which is just commonindy.org, go to their Race for the Cure thing and search for Pippa's Pink Coffee, it should pop up. Or you can just find me on social media. It'll be all over that too.
Very good. Gentlemen, I'll let you step up and make your presentation.
It's certainly a privilege to have you here, Pippa, and you can bet on our 50,000-watt station we'll be following the Indianapolis 500 as we do every year. And we see your logo there. It has a Honda on it. And we also see Kokomo Auto World, Honda, Toyota, and we think it's only fitting that Chris Scott makes this presentation to you.
Well, on behalf of Kokomo Auto World, and we just thank you and appreciate the opportunity to be part of this for you. So, thank you.
And if you want to see this again, we'll have this on YouTube, of course, and it is being video streamed live and worldwide right now. Pippa, you're a classy person to have. She never asked us for a penny to be here, and we're glad that we can give her 4 digits to be here. Thank you so much.
Once again, Pippa's going to hang out. We'll bring her out to the front of the stage here. You guys can get some photos if you like, or an autograph, that kind of thing. We can't keep her too long because it is snake night, and we don't want to keep that from happening. So, once again, ladies and gentlemen, Pippa Mann.